Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Casey from GravityKit, and this is part 4 of the GravityView Quick Start guide. So in this video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the view editor. All right, so we left off last time. We had just created a view, and it was a simple table view showing webinar registrations on the front end, like this. And here we are inside the view editor. So let's dive in. As I mentioned before, there's 3 different layouts that make up a view. We've got the multiple entries layout, where each of our entries are listed one after the other. Then we have a single entry layout for viewing more information about a specific entry. And then we have an edit entry layout for actually updating entries and editing information from the front end. And each of these layouts are configurable separately. So let's start here on the multiple entries layout and go through the different options and things that you can do. So here at the top widgets area, we can add different widgets, and these are tools for navigating a view. So if I click on the add widget button, you can see we have some different options here. You can add search bars, you can add a Gravity Forms form, you can embed another form in there. You can add pagination information, page links, page size, page links. And then you have the option to add custom content, and that gives you the ability to actually add your own HTML, text, or shortcodes even. And that's also available as a field, and I will talk more about that a little bit later. And then it's also worth noting that some of our extensions and other GravityKit add-ons actually extend GravityView with additional widgets here. And one example is if we scroll down to the view settings, we can open the permissions tab here and check the box that says allow export. And this will actually allow users to export data to CSV or TSV format. And when we enable that, we can come back up to the widget picker here. And you can see now we have another widget, which is the export link widget, which will output a link to download the data in the view to a CSV file. Okay, great. So let's take a quick look at the search bar here. We can click on the gear icon to open the settings, and we can configure the search bar. There's some different options for showing it horizontally, vertically, and then you can add additional fields here too by clicking the plus. And you can choose which fields you want to be searchable, and you can add as many as you like. And you can also reorder fields just using drag and drop as well. Okay, and then scrolling down to the entries field section, again, this is where our actual data is shown. And in this case, we're using the table layout, so everything here is a column in our table. And we have the ability to add additional columns as well. We can choose other fields to display here. And of course, you can reorder things with drag and drop. And then you have the ability to configure things on a per field basis. So we can click on the gear icon here, for example. This opens up the field settings. And there are a number of different options for display, the label, visibility, and advanced. So for display settings, we can make a certain field value a link through to the single entry page, like we discussed previously. We can choose to open that in a lightbox if we want to, or in a separate tab or window. Because we're using the table layout, we can give a column a specific percentage width if we want to customize that. We also have the ability to show the label here or add a custom label that we choose. We have visibility settings, so you can make a field only visible to logged in users if you wanted to restrict visibility. And if I check that, we can also restrict visibility by user role. And then finally, advanced, you can add your own CSS class here if you want to target that with your own styles. Okay, and then coming down to the bottom widgets area, again, same as the top, you can add different widgets here. And then finally, let's take a look at the view settings. So there are a range of different settings here. If I open up the first tab, you can enable Lightbox for images. We talked about GravityView's entry approval. We do have additional videos about this, so go ahead and watch that if you're interested in utilizing the entry approval functionality. And then there are a range of additional settings here. You can choose the number of entries per page. You can even hide data until a search is performed. And you can also choose what happens when there are actually no entries in the view. On the single entry page, you can customize that with its own title, and you can change the backlink label. There's some additional options here too. And on the edit entry screen here, you have the option to allow user edit. And this will allow logged in users to actually update their own entries directly from the front end. And there are some additional settings here too. The filter and sort tab will allow you to enable column sorting if you're using tables. And then you can also set a default sort. You can choose what field to sort by and whether to sort by ascending, descending, or random. And then you can choose a secondary sort value as well. And you can filter by date. So if you only want to display entries created within a certain date range, you can do that here. And then finally, we have an advanced filter, but this is an extension available to pro users. And this gives you very fine granularity in terms of filtering your view. And you can do that based on conditions that you set. And you can get very granular. You can filter based on a number of different values, the user's logged in status, user role, all kinds of things. Okay, and then the last thing I want to go over is the custom code. So if you're a developer and you want to add your own code, you can do that here. You can add CSS here in this box and JavaScript here, and those will execute only for that specific view. Okay, great. So let's scroll back up here and go through the different layouts. So we talked about the multiple entries layout. Let's go through to the single entry layout. So you can see this one looks a little bit different. We actually have additional fields added here. So if I go to my view on the front end, the single entry layout is the one that displays if we click on a name of a webinar registrant. So it's this one over here. So this is configurable. We can add additional fields here. If you wanted to, say, remove the email address, we could easily do that. We can reorder things. And of course, we have the option to add a link through to the edit entry layout, where the user or the admin can go ahead and update that entry from the front end. So that works very similarly to the single entry, except that is a dedicated field that you can add here to your view. So if I click here, you can see there's a link to edit entry field option here. And it's also worth noting that that is an option for the single entry too. Those can be dedicated fields. Okay, so let's move on to the edit entry layout. And as you can see, it's completely blank here. And if the layout is blank, that means all of the fields will be editable by default. If you only want certain fields to be editable, you can just add them here. And that will ensure that only the fields you add are editable from the front end. So let me go ahead and add a couple. And I'll update that. And then we can take a look at that on the front end, click Edit Entry. And as you can see, only those 3 fields that I added here are actually editable. So you have control over that. All right, great. So we're back in the view editor now. And there's a couple more things I wanted to go over. Let's go to the multiple entries layout. You may have noticed this here in the top right, this selector. If I click on that, I actually have the ability to change the view type. In GravityView, the multiple entries layout and the single entry layout, you can configure them separately so they can each have different view types if you want it. So on the multiple entries page, we're using a table, and I think that's pretty good. But let's say we wanted to change that for the single entry layout and actually go ahead and use a different layout type. We could do that. So let me choose the layout builder. And GravityView is going to warn us that this is going to change the field configuration. It's essentially going to reset it, so we'll have to start again, but that's okay. Continue. And now, as you can see, this is completely blank. And now we have the ability with the layout builder to add rows with different column structures. So let me click the Add Row button. You can see I have different options here for different column structures. So I'm going to go ahead and build out a little bit of a layout here. I'm going to start with a single column. Well, I already had one, so that's fine. Let's go ahead and add the date up here, the date created. And then I'm going to add another row, and let's do a 2-column layout this time. Let's add some information here. Okay, so I finished configuring my layout, and let me go ahead and update that, and we'll take a look at that on the front end. There we go. So we've got a nice layout here on the single entry that we created with the layout builder. And you can see that gives you a lot of fine control over how your data is displayed. One thing you'll note is that we don't have a link to the edit entry page here. So if I go back to the view, you'll actually see there's a bit of a warning here on the edit entry layout. And it says no fields link to the edit entry layout. So this is not actually accessible now because we've removed that link. So let's go back to the single entry. let's go ahead and add that link to edit entry, and we will show the label, and we'll update, and you can see that warning goes away. And now if I refresh, now you can see I've got my link in there. All right, and then it's important to note that the same thing goes for the single entry layout. So if I go back here to the multiple entries, and let's say I remove this field entirely, GravityView is now going to display a warning on the single entry layout telling us, hey, no fields linked to this layout. It's not actually accessible. So we need to make sure we do have a field that links through there. And that can either be an existing field that we turn into a link, or it can be a dedicated field. So we can add a table column here and choose the link to single entry field and just add that in. Okay, so I hope this video has given you a good idea of how the GravityView editor works. And in the next video, I'm going to be showing you how to actually embed your view on a page.